All participants, thank you for standing by. The conference is ready to begin. À tous les participants, merci d'avoir patienté. La conférence est sur le point de débuter. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Minister Garneau, Minister Alghabra, and High Commissioner Goodale press conference call on Flight PS752. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Minister Garneau. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à l'appel conférence de presse du ministre Garneau, ministre Alghabra et le haut-commissionnaire Goodale au sujet du vol PS752. J'aimerais maintenant céder la parole au ministre Garneau. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you for attending the press conference today. We all remember the horror of January 8th, 2020, when 176 innocent people died in the downing of Ukraine International Airlines Flight PS752 near Tehran. Many of those passengers were on their way to Canada, including 55 Canadian citizens, 30 permanent residents, and dozens of others with links to Canada. Our sense of shock and disbelief was compounded when the very next day, the Prime Minister announced that based on multiple sources, the flight had been shot down by Iranian surface-to-air missiles. From that point on, we vowed to the grieving families that we would seek transparency, accountability, and justice on their behalf. Nous savions que nous ne pouvions pas compter uniquement sur l'Iran pour produire les réponses que les familles méritent. Nous avons mis sur pied une équipe d'enquête composée d'experts de différents ministères pour analyser toutes les informations disponibles et partager publiquement un portrait plus clair de ce qui s'était passé. Aujourd'hui, l'équipe a publié son rapport qui peut être consulté en ligne. Le rapport met en lumière des informations confirmant que les décisions, les actions et les omissions de l'Iran par des responsables civils et militaires au plus haut niveau ont conduit à cette tragédie et il appuie la détermination du gouvernement du Canada selon laquelle l'Iran est entièrement responsable. The report highlights authorities' recklessness, incompetence, and wanton disregard for human life. It also shows how Iran has covered up information, bulldozed the crash site, providing only a misleading and superficial account of events. The forensic team has come to the following three findings. First, Iran failed to ensure the safety of its airspace or even to notify airlines of the risks, thus setting the stage for a terrible tragedy to occur. Second, a surface-to-air missile operator made a series of extremely flawed decisions that could have and should have been avoided, which resulted in the operator launching missiles with the intention to destroy what was perceived as a hostile target. And finally, Iran's military command and control did not address the failures of the surface-to-air missile unit operator in a timely manner and completely failed to put in place the necessary measures to prevent the disaster. The facts are clear. Iran is responsible for the deaths of 176 innocent people. This includes seeking from Iran to the families we continue to grieve their loved ones. I want to reiterate our commitment to hold Iran accountable and seek full reparations in accordance with international law. This includes seeking from Iran a full accounting of the events that took place, complete transparency regarding the ongoing criminal prosecutions, and concrete guarantees by Iran that measures have been taken to ensure that such a tragedy will never happen again. Nous avons remis un avis de réclamation qui constitue la première étape du processus de négociation avec l'Iran sur la question des réparations. Pour ce groupe, nous travaillerons avec d'autres pays touchés dans le cadre du groupe international de coordination et d'intervention pour les victimes du vol PS752. Les victimes, leurs familles et leurs proches restent dans nos cœurs. Nous continuerons à faire tout notre possible pour les aider à tourner la page et à trouver un sentiment de justice. Je passe maintenant la parole à mon collègue, le ministre Alghabra.
Thank you, Minister Garneau. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I'm joining you virtually today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I want to take a moment first to acknowledge the heartbreaking news coming out of the Kawesas First Nation. There are no words to describe the horrendous impacts residential schools have had on Indigenous peoples. To the survivors and families of the Maryvale residential school site, the entire country grieves with you. Today, I want to remind all Canadians and the international community why we are here. First, I want to recognize and honor the victims and their loved ones of the unspeakable and preventable tragedy of PS752. We are here to fight for justice, transparency, and accountability on behalf of 176 innocent people, including 55 Canadian citizens and 30 permanent residents. As Minister Garneau has just made clear, the forensic team's report brings to light the acts and omissions that led to the shootdown of Flight PS752. This report shows clearly that Iranian civilian and military authorities are fully responsible for the downing of the flight. Today, as I did last week at the International Civil Aviation Organization, I publicly condemn Iran for its actions that directly led to 176 innocent people being killed. And to the families and loved ones of the victims, know that all Canadians continue to mourn your loss. I've personally met with many of the families of the victims of this horrific event. Every day since this January 8th, 2020, they've had to look at empty chairs at the dinner table and to pass by bedrooms that are no longer being used. They look to us to provide them with answers and to ensure that no other family has to do the same in the future. Over the past year, Canada has worked tirelessly to get transparency, accountability, and justice that the victims and their families deserve. We've been unrelenting in the pursuit of the truth. Nous devons poursuivre la vérité. Canada will not accept anything less than a comprehensive and honest explanation from the Iranian regime of what exactly happened that day. Just yesterday, we were reminded of another senseless tragedy as we marked the 36th anniversary of the bombing of Air India Flight 182. We continue to mourn the 329 souls lost, including 268 Canadian citizens. In response to our country's collective grief, our government has also committed to ensuring that no civilian is ever again put at risk by flying over or near a conflict zone. We owe the victims nothing less. We have a duty to learn from past events. Nous devons apprendre des événements précédents. And we must and we will take action to properly commemorate tragedies and the victims of this tragedy. In February 2020, at a major security conference in Munich, Prime Minister Trudeau advocated for new international rules through the Safer Skies initiative to protect civilian airliners flying near conflict zones. Within weeks, we had taken a significant first step toward preventing similar tragedies when Minister Garneau, my predecessor as Minister of Transport, began working with the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, to move the Safer Skies initiative forward. Through Safer Skies, Canada is working with international organizations, the civil aviation industry, and ICAO to reduce the risks of conflict zones and their disastrous effects on aviation safety. Safe and secure air travel will be more important than ever when the world emerges from the global COVID-19 pandemic. Our government is taking concrete action to prevent other countries from suffering a similar preventable loss. And the Safer Skies initiative is a big part of our response. Last week, I also outlined to ICAO that the International Aviation Incident Investigation regime must do better. Canada's forensic report was needed because Iran investigated itself under the guise of international rules and absolved itself of all responsibility. We will continue to work with allies at ICAO because this cannot happen again. Canada intends to present a working paper at ICAO's upcoming high-level conference on COVID-19, proposing changes to enhance the conduct of future investigations. We will always remember the PS752 tragedy, honor those who lost their life, and never forget them. Thank you, merci, and we will take your questions now.
Thank you, merci. You may press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Vous pouvez appuyer sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. The first question is from Ashley Burke from CBC News. Please go ahead.
Thanks for taking my question. Minister Garneau, Canada's former Foreign Affairs Minister, said that he did not believe this was human error, but Canada does not have any of its own evidence, according to this report, to suggest that. As a government, and as you enter talks with Iran, are you ruling out the possibility this was intentional?
Thank you for the question. It was definitely intentional from the point of view of the missile battery operator in firing the two missiles. The forensic team did a very thorough analysis based on all of the available information, including intelligence. That is not to say it's 100% of the information, because only Iran has some of the answers to the questions that have not yet been answered. However, as it pointed out in its report, it did not have any indication that the act itself was premeditated in the sense that it had been planned against that specific aircraft. Having said that, Iran does not get off the hook in any way whatsoever. It is totally responsible for what happened due to a combination of incompetence, lack of accountability, a total failure of their command and control system, a total failure to properly assess the risk, a total failure to close the airspace, and not even bothering to inform the aircraft taking off that they were in a risk environment because missile batteries had been set up in the vicinity of the airport. So Iran is 100% accountable for what happened. Thank you.
And as a follow, what do you say to families today who might be disappointed that, they've been waiting 8 months and anxiously awaiting this report, and it did not find conclusive evidence that Canada has that the downing was premeditated, and some of them, took great risks to get investigative leads for this team?
Thank you. And in fact, the three of us who are on this press conference just concluded a meeting with the families of the victims, and it is perfectly understandable that they are feeling a sense of disappointment. However, the purpose, of course, of the forensic report, which was briefed to them by Jeff Jaworski prior to our meeting with them, was to, based on all of the available information, try to draw the most accurate picture of the events. And the reading of the report, as I mentioned in my first answer to you, does not in any way exculpate Iran from its total failure to avoid what happened. So we had a very good conversation with the family members, and we understand that some of them are disappointed, and that is perfectly natural.
And may I add something to what Minister Garneau had said? Our duty, our sacred duty, is to the families and to Canadians. We are pursuing relentlessly truth and justice and accountability. And the reason why we had to commission this report is because Iran also failed to conduct a comprehensive report an assessment of what happened and failed to take accountability for what had happened. So we have a responsibility to the families, to Canadians, to release or share the findings of this report. But as the report confirmed, and as Minister Garneau has just confirmed, this report confirms that Iran is solely responsible for what had happened. And they have yet to come to terms with that. They have yet to hold individuals and institutions accountable. And they have yet to take measures to ensure that this never happens again. So we will work with our partners, we will work with international organizations, and we will work with the families to ensure that we achieve justice, transparency, and accountability.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Chris Reynolds from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much for taking our questions, Ministers. Minister Garneau, so just to sum up, we've now had multiple investigations about this incident. Basically, are you satisfied that we now have the truth of what happened? We have the complete truth. And if not, are we ever going to get it?
So the answer is no, we're not satisfied. We don't have the complete truth because, as I mentioned, for some things, only Iran can provide that. And Special Advisor Goodale, who put out a very thorough report late last year, had in his report 21 questions that remained unanswered. And the forensic report also highlights that there are certain issues that remain unanswered. And we will pursue the truth with Iran. And if you look at what's called the Notice of Claim, which is the official document that has been provided to Iran, which sets the stage now for negotiations, it clearly says that Canada has an expectation of having all of the truth provided transparently with respect to the tragic events of PS752. So that will continue to be one of the requirements that we will pursue as part of a larger set of negotiations.
Thank you. Also, for you, Minister Garneau, about 3 months ago, you rejected a report from Iran's Civil Aviation Authority, but the forensic team's investigation relies on it, in part, among many other sources and pieces of intelligence, as I understand it, and it comes to a similar conclusion regarding a fatal error by a ground-to-surface missile operator. So are there parts of the Iran report's analysis that are reliable?
The Iran report is has gaping holes in terms of providing answers. Yes, an operator fired 2 missiles, but there was a total failure of the command and control system, which should have detected prior to and in the process of validating the possibility that there was an incoming cruise missile. That command and control system totally failed in this case. Imagine having a series of missile operators deployed around a busy airport and no coordination between the command and control structure that is supposed to ensure that when a decision is made or when there is the possibility of having to fire a missile, that has been validated. So the command and control structure and protocols completely failed, and Iran is silent on that, and it does not identify the people who are responsible. It places all of the blame on people lower down in the structure, and that is totally unacceptable. So that is something that the forensic report points out, and that is something that Iran still has to provide answers to.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question de Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. La parole est à vous.
Bonjour, merci de prendre nos questions. La question est pour vous, M. Garneau. certaines familles, la Cour supérieure de l'Ontario même dit que c'était un acte terroriste. Le rapport dit l'Iran est responsable, mais c'était pas prémédité. Donc, ce qu'on entend, c'était peut-être de l'incompétence ou de l'insouciance ou une erreur triste dont l'Iran est responsable, mais peut-être juste une erreur quand même. Est-ce que c'est pas un peu mou, ça, comme conclusion?
Le rapport qui a été préparé après des mois de consultation, des consultations avec d'autres départements, mais avec nos services de l'intelligence également, et en examinant en profondeur le rapport qui avait été soumis par l'Iran, est sorti avec ce qu'il a établi comme étant les faits basés sur l'information qui était disponible. Alors, je crois que ce travail-là a été fait consciencieusement, mais ça n'excuse aucunement l'Iran vis-à-vis de ce qui s'est passé. Ils sont 100% responsables pour cette tragédie à cause de non seulement d'incompétence, mais également parce qu'ils n'ont pas mis en place les structures nécessaires pour valider, avant de tirer des missiles, que c'était bel et bien des menaces. Deuxièmement, ils n'ont pas fait une analyse des risques avant de déployer leur système anti-air. Ils n'ont pas fermé l'espace aérien. Ils n'ont même pas informé les compagnies d'aviation qui avaient des décollages prévus ce soir-là. Alors, c'est sur plusieurs niveaux qu'ils ont été non seulement incompétents, mais ils ont manqué à leur devoir dans une situation qui était potentiellement dangereuse. Alors, ils sont 100% responsables pour ce qui s'est passé et ils doivent être redevables aux familles et au monde entier parce qu'en ce moment, l'espace aérien de l'Iran n'est pas sécuritaire.
Dans ce qu'on entend aussi dans le rapport, ce qu'on a, pas toute l'information qu'on souhaite, pas toute la vérité. Est-ce que ce rapport-là, manifestement, va pas apaiser les familles des victimes et le fait de demander un avis de réclamation, c'est une première étape, mais on est loin de la coupe aux lèvres. Qu'est-ce que vous avez à offrir aujourd'hui aux victimes devant un rapport qu'eux considèrent plutôt tiède?
Je crois, et nous en avons parlé parce qu'on a rencontré les familles juste avant cette conférence de presse, que le rapport qui a été préparé, en fait, va nous aider dans l'avis de réclamation parce qu'il établit très clairement des faits qui n'avaient pas été inclus dans le rapport final de l'Iran. Et je pense que ultimement, ça va nous aider et aider les familles à être compensées et à assurer une plus grande transparence et un plus grand sens de la justice que si le rapport n'avait pas été préparé. Alors, c'est un message que nous avons communiqué. On comprend la déception des familles, c'est tout à fait normal, mais on leur a assuré que nous allons continuer de travailler très, très, très fort pour eux, pour assurer la transparence, la justice et la redevabilité du pays, de l'Iran.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question est de Estelle Côté-Sroca de Radio-Canada. La parole est à vous.
Bonjour, M. Garneau. La question est pour vous. Mon collègue Christian Noël en faisait mention. La Cour supérieure de l'Ontario, elle a qualifié cette tragédie-là d'acte terroriste. Vous, qu'est-ce qui vous empêche d'utiliser ces mots-là dans le rapport? Pourquoi vous n'en êtes pas arrivé à la même conclusion?
Ben, d'abord, je veux clarifier que nous n'étions aucunement impliqués dans le processus qui a mené la Cour supérieure à sa décision. Par contre, nous avons demandé au groupe qui a soumis le rapport qui est publié aujourd'hui d'aller en profondeur sur cet incident tragique parce qu'on n'était pas satisfait que l'Iran nous avait fourni toutes les réponses. Alors, nous avons donné ce mandat à un groupe qui a pu consulter, examiner tous les faits, communiquer avec différents départements, incluant nos services de l'intelligence pour produire, basé sur ce que nous avons comme les faits, le rapport le plus complet dans les circonstances. Le mot terroriste a une certaine interprétation dans le public, mais pour considérer un incident comme étant un incident terroriste, officiellement, la définition est très, très précise. Et puis, en ce moment, nous voulons, bien sûr, suivre le processus de négociation, obtenir les autres réponses qui manquent. Mais en ce moment, ce n'est pas quelque chose que nous avons décidé de qualifier comme un acte terroriste basé sur toute l'information que nous avons.
Question de relance pour vous, M. Garneau. Certaines familles aimeraient que le gouvernement cesse de négocier avec l'Iran et se tourne plutôt vers la Cour internationale de justice. Est-ce que c'est quelque chose que vous envisagez de faire appel à la Cour internationale de justice?
C'est certainement une option, mais la Cour internationale de justice exige que des négociations soient faites auparavant, de bonne foi, entre les deux parties, avant qu'une soumission leur soit envoyée. Alors, nous allons bien sûr examiner, ou nous allons bien sûr procéder avec les négociations avec l'Iran comme il se doit. Et nous avons émis notre document pour les informer des détails de cette négociation. Et si on juge qu'ils ne négocient pas de bonne foi, c'est une option qui pourrait être considérée pour l'avenir.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, you may press star 1 if you have a question. De nouveau, vous pouvez appuyer sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. The next question is from Stephanie Levitz from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking our questions. The line on my end is a little choppy, so I'm hoping you can hear me. Just to pick up on what my colleague just asked, I mean, you've said it's unacceptable. You've said that Iran is not providing enough information. What is the practical next step here? Is it sanctions? Is it what leverage exists to compel them to produce the information they seem, quite frankly, not interested in providing?
So we have provided them on the 3rd of June, in fact, with a notice of claim, which has been prepared by the coordination group, which involves several countries who had citizens who lost their lives. They now must respond to that notice of claim, which lays out a number of expectations that we have as part of the negotiations. It's not just about financial compensation. It's other things such as proving to us that they're putting in place measures to prevent this kind of thing from ever happening before, from also putting out a formal apology, also returning certain remains and stolen property to the families of the victims. There's a number of things that are in there. Now, Iran must respond to this. If they respond, then we begin the negotiations. If the negotiations proceed, as we hope they will, and end up with a proper ending, then we will have done the job. If, on the other hand, Iran does not display good faith, then we will have the option of going to the dispute resolution mechanism of ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. And if that is not satisfactory, we can go to the International Court of Justice. So there is a sequence based on whether or not negotiations are done in good faith. The other thing I would like to add as well is that there's a limit to our patience in terms of waiting for Iran to get back to us. We will be reminding them on a very regular basis that they owe us an answer. And after some point in time, if we feel that they are not intending to reply to us, then we will go to those alternate options.
Yeah, I guess just as a follow-up, what is that limit? I mean, is it a matter of months, years? At what point do you, and what makes you even think that Iran is going to reply?
I will just say at this point, definitely not years.
Thank you, merci. The The next question is from Nahayed Tissoud from CBC Power and Politics. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Perhaps as a follow-up to Minister Garneau saying that it may not be years, definitely not years. So can you please be a little bit more concrete in terms of how long it will for Iran to actually respond to that this claim?
So what I will say is that we are going to remind them on a regular basis, but I'm not going to give you an exact date on when, if they haven't replied to us, that we're going to move to another approach. What I will say is that we delivered the coordination group the notice of claim to Iran on the 3rd of June. We recognize that they've just gone through a presidential election. That's over now, but we will be following up very, very closely and regularly, and that's our intention because we intend for this issue to be addressed.
Thank you, merci. There are no further questions. Nous n'avons plus de questions. The conference has now ended. La conférence est maintenant terminée. Please disconnect your lines at this time. Veuillez s'il vous plaît raccrocher votre ligne. Thank you for your participation. Merci à tous les participants qui se sont joints.